I think there's two types of entrepreneurs. Those who wake up one day with a better idea and they say, oh my God, I've got this idea, I've got to do something about it. And it drives them forward almost unceasingly. There's another type of entrepreneur that goes out and gets a job and for whatever reason doesn't keep that job. In my case, that happened many times in a row. I was pretty reliably informed that I was a difficult employee when I was quite young. And so I realized that if I was going to stay employed, I was going to have to employ myself. And I think I'm not the only person like that. So I came at entrepreneurship not so much because I wanted to run my own business, but because it was perfectly clear to me that the way I was going to get my way forward in life was to be my own boss. And so I started my first business with my brother because oddly enough, he has a similar personality traits. And so we literally just started selling computers on the streets of LA until we figured out what we were going to do with our life.
I got to a certain point in my career where it was a new challenge. I'd hit various kind of personal milestones, and there was a new challenge of having my own business and actually seeing could I do it and make all those decisions myself. But the second thing was my employment history had given me my recent employment history. My last employer was Amazon. There was a lot I learned there that kind of completed the jigsaw. Stuff about high-level business planning and how do you actually get stuff to happen from day one. And I came out of that thinking, if I don't do it now, when am I going to do it?
And you have ideas.
Yeah.
I think he's driven by ideas. He has a business he's got, and he's got an idea for a new business, and it's a good idea, and he's an idea-driven entrepreneur. You answered the question when you were ready.
Yeah. Well, I've been waiting 10 years to have a good idea. I've had a lot of ideas, but there are two now, one of which is working and it's fine, and one of which is hopefully about to work, which is actually very big and scales and has all those kind of ticks that I want to have in business. So yeah, it's time, but it's taken a long time to get those ideas.
Well, it may not be what you want to hear, but it's my view that when you're 16 years old, the likelihood of you succeeding in business at that age is poor, very, very poor. And you create an artificial barrier to success by trying to start so young. And I would actually say to somebody, even if school isn't their cup of tea, if the school can provide them with a type of education that will help them start a business, then that they should focus on those elements of school which help them there, if that's where they intend to go. But I also believe strongly that it's unreasonably tough at 16. You cannot sign a contract at 16. You cannot go out and do business trivially at 16. At 18, you can now sign a contract, you probably don't know what to do with it if you signed it. And so I'm not a huge fan of people at that age trying to create scale businesses. On the other hand, I think you can be effectively self-employed at 18. Thus, if you learn a trade and you don't want to work for someone else, I say, good on you, let's just make sure you know what you're doing well enough so you know how to bill, you know how to invoice, you know how to market. You can get out there at 18 if you have something to sell. Frequently would be yourself.
I think there's the other problem as well. I think you iterated the three big problems very well. The other one, of course, is credibility. It's very difficult when when you're 16 or 17 to go to, if you're selling things, not just a commodity off a shelf. It's very hard to go to someone and be credible and get them to do business with you. It's hard when you're 25. It gets easier once you start going grey, and once you're 35, 40, but it's certainly very hard when you're that age. I think I agree with Doug, but I think it's a great time in your life to try stuff. If you try a business, whether it's making homemade jam or selling computers on street or whatever, to try stuff and get it wrong. You will get stuff wrong, but there's very good learning experiences there. I think the ambition of having a scale business at that age and making it all perfect and shiny and building it up to whatever, I think that's very, very hard. But it's a great opportunity to go learn stuff and try stuff. The other thing is picking the right elements of formal education is, I think, critical. We had a conversation just before we came in the room. Part of that conversation was looking at a spreadsheet and going, well, what about that and that? Oh yes, and that works. There are things like that that are absolutely invaluable to anyone who wants to do a business, whether you're 16, whether you're 60. I'd say there are things in formal education that are almost must-haves. If you can't write a decent, business proposal, write decent English or German or French or whatever language you're working in, or do basic spreadsheet stuff, you are giving yourself a huge burden to carry.
The fact of the matter is, I run something called School for Startups. In those words lies my belief. One can teach entrepreneurship. A lot of people think an entrepreneur is born. This is utter nonsense. Babies are born. That's like saying world-class violinists are born. No, they're not. They spend 20 years at hard graft learning to play a violin. I guarantee you, all world-class violinists first learned how to play a violin. All crap violinists also first learned how to play a violin, but they all had one thing in common. First, they learned. The fact is, the tools of entrepreneurship are teachable. You know that, and I know that's why we both persevere in trying to teach. This notion that you're born an entrepreneur is unfortunate, because it says to everyone, before you were ever born, it was decided for you. It's not true. Any of us can be a self-standing entrepreneur if we want to be. You don't have to be a natural entrepreneur. You don't have to be good at sales. You can be quite shy. You can have all sorts of skills, but the fact is, almost every business is composed of a team of people. Your skills will fit into that team. The question is, where do they fit in? So I just have no time for people who tell me you can't teach other people how to start a business, which means anything a college does to encourage it, I think, is a great step in the right direction.
Whenever I talk to people about, why don't you become an entrepreneur? Why don't you set your own business? Why don't you take what you're doing for someone else and do it yourself? The first thing a lot of people say is, I just wouldn't know where to start. And this is a process. We can teach people there are things you do, and it may be stuff on day one you don't know how to do it. But we can show you how to chip away at that huge block. You don't do everything on day one. Setting up a business, operating, running a business is a huge, big, complex task with lots of moving parts. Trying to fit all of that in and trying to get your head around all of that on day one is near impossible. Taking individual sections and saying, okay, so how do we think about the product? How do we think about marketing? How do we think about finance? All of those things, taking them separately, kind of bite-sized chunks, giving people processes they need to figure out what they need to do is very doable. And that's exactly the approach we take. People should come out of what we're doing at School for Startups saying, okay, I know where to start. I know what I'm going to do tomorrow. I know how to start chipping away at that huge big block that is my business.